There are times in life when you want to drop everything and do the worst. But that's not always the answer. I am incredibly grateful to my sister who supported me during a difficult time in my life because I was ready to do a terrible thing. After I found out about my wife cheating on me, I was in shock. On Friday night, I found myself in the back of the club, nestled in a dark corner, watching the painful unraveling of my 22 years of marriage. My wife had been enjoying intimacy with her coworker Taryn for a long time. The signs had been visible for weeks: the exhaustion of intimacy, the pointless late-night arguments, her newfound social outings on the pretext of having a couple of drinks with coworkers. She would return well past midnight. Despite my efforts to scrutinize her belongings and phone, I found no concrete evidence until tonight. She was allegedly enjoying casual drinks with her coworkers while I watched her office building, vigilantly awaiting her return. Then it was in his car. They passed right in front of my eyes, confirming my suspicions. Watching them act like a pair of teenagers, his hand tentatively under his desk, I was certain of her involvement. She leaned back with an expression of ecstasy on her face. I filmed the entire scene on my phone and was about to leave both the club and my marriage. The moment he stood up and asked her to dance, the look she gave him mirrored the one she had once saved for me in the early days of our marriage. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness or reconciliation was useless. She belonged to him completely. Even if they consummated their relationship, it was immaterial. She was lost to me. It was then that I realized she had extinguished the last glimmer of love I had harbored for her. As they twirled around on the dance floor, oblivious to the world around them, I walked over to their table, dropped my wedding ring in her glass and left. I drove home, knowing a storm was coming, but determined not to weather it, expecting that outcome. I found a permanent place to live, loaded my belongings and tools into the back of an old pickup truck, laptop on the passenger seat, phone off, determined not to entertain a litany of lies and excuses. After our 2 children left for college, we moved out of the big house, which she insisted we do. With our remaining funds, about $300,000, we planned to tour Europe, fulfilling our longtime dream of traveling. For the first night, I stayed in a motel, sorted out our finances and divided them equally after paying off and canceling credit cards, transferred most of the funds to another account set aside for her birthdays and Christmas gifts, drafted a resignation letter and emailed it to her boss, explained that the company car was parked at my address and the keys were hanging on a hook in the garage, expressed regret and assured that I would provide details of my resignation letter. Final salary for the chief engineer responsible for building turbines for both the naval and civilian markets. I was confident that my assistant would manage in my absence with no problem. I showered and got ready for bed. Sister Sarah called, wondering what was going on. I simply advised her to talk to Linda and ended the call. It was the most restful night's sleep I had had in weeks. The doubts and suspicions had finally dissipated, allowing me to move on. I had a lot of fun dancing with Terry. Didn't even think about calling him Taryn, looking forward to our first night together in his room. So far we had only had quick dates during lunch breaks and supposed bachelorette parties. Spending the whole night together would be different. I tried to push away thoughts of the conversation I was going to have with Jake tomorrow. Terry assured me that Jake would come to his senses. If he doesn't, he'll have to pay me alimony and I'll have everything I need. A devoted husband I adored and a young, attractive lover who would fulfill my desires. But I couldn't help but wonder if it would be as exciting as when it all first started. Half the fun was in secretly escaping from Jake. Still, I was looking forward to returning to our room in anticipation of a night of passion. Terry had already given me some pleasure with his careful movements under the table, but it wasn't enough. After dancing a few more tunes, we returned to our table. Terry quickly drained his glass and made a sign for me to do the same. Lifting my glass, I noticed something inside. Taking it by my finger, I pulled the object out and saw that it was a wedding ring. A sudden chill ran down my back. I reached over and turned on the table lamp that Terry had turned off earlier to create a romantic atmosphere. I looked at the inscription on the inside of the ring, "To my dear Jake from his loving fiancée Linda." I was on the verge of choking. As I sat looking at the ring, memories of our wedding and honeymoon came flooding back to me. Panic gripped me as I realized the consequences of my actions. Jake must have caught us together and realized I was having an affair. All plans for the evening evaporated as rationality returned. I love Jake very much. How could I have betrayed him like this? What was wrong with me? It was as if I'd been struck by some alien force. I looked around desperately, fearing that Jake was still here. I felt an urgent need to throw myself at his feet and beg for forgiveness, but of course he was long gone. Terry took the ring from my trembling hand and examined the inscription. This changes nothing. Now that the little cuckold knows about us, you're still going to confess to him tomorrow. He'll just have to accept that I'm the alpha male and he's the beta. I began to look at Terry differently, realizing that he had never disrespected Jake until that moment. His intentions weren't just to be with me. He was trying his hardest to destroy Jake and our marriage. I was furious at both him and myself for being so easily deceived and seduced. You despicable, __. Jake is superior to you in every way. I don't know what I see in you. Did you give me illegal substances or something? Terry replied, yes, I gave you illegal substances the first time, but after that you couldn't resist. You're just insanely beautiful. He chuckled as he spoke, but his laughter was interrupted when a man put his hand on his shoulder and interjected into the conversation. Okay, buddy, you just confessed to a serious crime in front of numerous witnesses. By giving her illegal substances and using them for personal gain, you have committed a terrible crime. Sit down and wait for the deputy sheriff. I'm Sheriff Mason, you're under arrest, he said, forcibly seating Terry, who looked very frightened. Pulling out a notepad and pen, I also noticed he had a gun on his belt. He began questioning the witnesses. Several came forward stating that they had heard what had happened. When the sheriff asked if I would testify, I agreed, gave my name and address, and asked if I could leave. Miss, I don't know your plans, but if you want to save your marriage, I suggest you humble yourself to your husband and ask for forgiveness. That is exactly my plan. I just hope it's not too late. I hurried out of the club, trying to call Jake, but my number was blocked. Damn it. I caught a cab and asked the driver to hurry up, offering to pay double. Arrived home. Darkness enveloped everything around me. The garage door was open, revealing Jake's company car, but his pickup was gone. Panic overwhelmed me. It was too late. He was already gone. In desperation, I called my sister Sarah, whom Jake considered his family. Hey Linda, why the late call? Is everything okay? Tears streamed down my face. Finally, I managed to get it out. I don't know. I screwed up and now Jake is gone. I can't reach him and I'm lost. Don't worry, it's not as bad as it looks. I'll be there. Brew some coffee with extra sugar and hang in there. I ended my conversation with Linda and dialed Jake's number. He picked up after the second ring. Jake, where are you? Linda is frantically looking for you. What's going on? It's better if you ask her, he replied. I plan to, but she's in a panic and you're not taking her calls. Why? I asked. Like I said, ask her. Right now, I need to get some sleep. With that, he ended the call. I got dressed and drove to their house. It was only a 20-minute drive. Upon arrival, I immediately noticed that Linda's car was gone along with Jake's truck, although his work car was parked in the garage. The door was unlocked, so I let myself go inside. Inside, I found Linda crying on the floor. I helped her up and sat her in a chair. After making coffee, she calmed down a bit. Linda, can you hear me? I called Jake, but he refused to say anything and told me to ask you. He spoke very quietly. What happened? After I got the whole story out of her, I was torn between comforting her, as she seemed genuinely ashamed of her actions, and a fit of anger for hurting my brother. In the end, I chose neither course of action and just sat there watching her confusion. I could have forgiven her in the first instance, considering she was drugged, but her subsequent comeback was unforgivable. Jake wouldn't forgive her. The man who had initiated the mess and seduced Linda was facing legal consequences and a long prison sentence. I didn't envy him. However, the question remained as to what should be done with Linda. Would they be able to overcome this betrayal? Reflecting on my own experience of Tracy's infidelity, I knew I could not forgive. I easily severed our partnership and sent her packing. I suspected Jake might have done the same. Then there was the children to consider. Wendy would probably distance herself from her mother by being closer to her father. But Mike was loyal to his mother. If he took her side, it would crush Jake. It was an unpleasant situation. I decided to mediate and try to reconcile them without pushing Jake away. I helped Linda to her bedroom. She could barely walk. I undressed her and put her to bed. I knew I needed to talk to Jake, but that would have to wait until morning. I woke up feeling better than I had in weeks. It's amazing how decisive action can lift one's spirits. Not wanting to continue living in the motel prompted me to call Sarah to see if I could stay with her temporarily. "Hey Sarah, where are you?" "I'm at your house. Linda is still asleep. I figured since it's Saturday, I'd leave her to rest. Where are you?" "I'm at the motel on the 401. I was wondering if I could come over for a little while until I get everything sorted out. I don't have a home here anymore. Did she tell you what happened?" I asked. "Yes, and I'm mad at her for it. But there's more to the story than you know. The guy she was with admitted to drugging her. The sheriff arrested him after overhearing their argument and gathering witnesses. It doesn't matter. I saw the way she looked at him and I knew it was over. She looked at him the same way she looked at me on our honeymoon. I can't speak to what you saw or thought you saw, but she is genuinely devastated. Can you at least listen to her? It might help you move on. It's still too fresh. The pain is unbearable. I just wanted to stop. How could she betray us like this? Was I such a terrible husband that she needed to find someone else? Am I not enough for her? I can't take it anymore. I just want it to end. You realize I went through the same thing when I found out Tracy cheated on me. I wanted to destroy them both, drown my sorrow in alcohol, and even considered leaving this world," Sarah said. "Now that I think about it, it seems like a tempting option. Do you remember that show about a popular band in Korea? Do you remember the title song? That means something to you, right? It sounds like a relief to me now, an end to suffering." "Jake, don't even joke about that." "It's not a joke. This feels like the right way out." Sarah was about to speak when I turned my phone off. My thoughts returned to the gun hidden in the glove compartment. Yes, that would be enough. Linda would carry the burden of guilt for the rest of her life. I gathered my things from the hotel, loaded them into the back seat of my truck, and drove off. I wasn't sure where I was headed, but I remembered the quarry and headed there. Parking upon arrival, I pulled my gun out of the glove compartment and made sure it was loaded. Sitting there, I examined the weapon, trying to weigh the pros and cons of my decision. Instant relief from all my problems. No more suffering. No need to confront a lying wife and impending divorce proceedings. I would get everything I resented. Why should she benefit from betrayal? My sister would be shattered. My parents were long gone. And then I thought of the children. Although they were now adults, they still relied on my guidance and didn't deserve to be without parents. I holstered the gun and dialed my sister's number. Thank God I was worried. You might have done something reckless when I checked the gun safe and saw your gun was missing. I feared the worst. Where are you now? I called the motel and was told you'd already checked out. I'm parked at the old quarry, just thinking. I thought about taking the easy way out, but then I weighed the pros and cons in my mind. It was a close decision until I thought of Don and Mike. I couldn't let them down. So tell me if I should do it. You've been through this before, so please tell me what to do. Look, Jake, there's no easy answer. You need to take some time. Come over to my place, get something to eat, get some rest. I'll be home as soon as I can. Linda needs someone around right now. I know it may seem like I'm taking sides, but I'm not. You both mean a lot to me, but if it comes down to it, I'm on your side. Now call me when you're ready. I don't have anything else to do. That's exactly what I'll do. I set the phone aside. My body was still shaking from barely escaping the loss of my brother. Glancing at my hands, I noticed that they were still shaking uncontrollably. My emotions were in turmoil, and suddenly tears flowed. This served as a faint relief. Soon my tears turned to sobs, but I found comfort as arms embraced me, offering some degree of comfort. I woke up and looked around the room, hoping it was a nightmare. Jake's side of the bed remained untouched. I ran my fingers over the pillow, catching a faint whiff of his scent clinging to his memory. I berated myself for my stupid actions, wondering if Jake would ever forgive me. Those thoughts consumed me, but I shook them off, threw on my robe, and wondered who had undressed me and put me to bed. The events of last night came over me as I reached for the door, barely holding myself back. Curiosity lingered over Sarah's presence. Was she making coffee? I walked down the stairs and found Sarah on the couch. Tears were streaming down her face. Sitting beside her, I enclosed her in a soothing embrace reminiscent of how one soothes a baby. Amidst her sobs and attempts to speak, I just held her until she calmed down. I'm sorry I broke down like that. but I've been on an emotional roller coaster all morning. I'm the one who should apologize. This whole thing is my fault. It's completely my fault. I never thought I'd betray Jake like this, but I did, and I can't understand why. You'll need to find a more reassuring explanation when you talk to Jake. He's on edge, and it doesn't take much to push it. Have you talked to Jake? How is he doing? Where is he? Is he coming home? And what do you mean by on the edge? I told her about my conversation with Jake. When she realized she almost caused his death, her face went blank and then she passed out. Being a nurse, I knew what to do. I gently laid her on the couch and elevated her legs with pillows to improve blood flow to her heart. Then I made coffee and brought a damp towel. Hoping that the aroma of coffee would wake her up, I gently wiped her face with the towel. Eventually, she regained consciousness and sat up, but still looked absent. Despite my attempts to engage her in conversation, she didn't respond. I tried pinching her neck to cause discomfort, but there was no response. The slap also had no effect. She was in a state of complete catatonia. Realizing there was nothing more I could do, I dialed 911 and called an ambulance. I have encountered similar situations with PTSD patients. They would withdraw into a mental space where they felt no pain. Sometimes they would come out of this state quickly, and sometimes they would appear and disappear unpredictably. Unfortunately, in some cases this state became permanent and people regressed to a childlike state. I followed the ambulance to the hospital and hospitalized her. When the doctor asked about the cause of her condition, I recounted the events of the past 24 hours and how Jake's actions had almost caused harm. The doctor recommended that Jake also be evaluated for PTSD before he put himself in more danger. When asked about Linda's insurance information, I explained that I would need to contact her employers and Jake for those details. After I informed Jake of Linda's condition, his demeanor immediately changed. "I'm on my way to the hospital," he said. Glancing at my phone, I felt a glimmer of hope. 20 minutes later he arrived, but we were barred from entering. The doctor feared it might do more harm than good. He mentioned that more information would be available after speaking with a local psychiatrist. Shortly thereafter, the receptionist arrived to fill out the admission paperwork. When asked about insurance, Jake searched Linda's purse and found her insurance card. Handing the card to the receptionist, he left, promising to return later. Jake explained that he had resigned and wasn't sure if their insurance coverage was still in effect. Nothing had changed. Linda had been heavily sedated and was in a completely unconscious state. We were allowed to stay by her side. I noticed Jake gently holding her hand. It warmed my heart. I wondered what could have motivated Linda to have an affair. It was completely out of character for her, considering how much she loved Jake as much as I did. I told Jake that I needed to go home to freshen up, grab a bite to eat and change, assuring him that I would be back soon, expecting Linda to wake up on Sunday morning. We were instructed to wait outside until the psychiatrist arrived. We were both starving, so we headed to the dining room for breakfast. Upon our return, we found that the psychiatrist was already with Linda, so we waited until he finished his session. Eventually, he took us into a private room to discuss his findings first. He encouraged us to recount the events leading up to the present, urging us to be thorough, regardless of the discomfort it might cause. We recounted everything from the time Jake caught her with another man to the present, including Jake's downward spiral. The psychiatrist mentioned that he had tried to contact Linda but had gotten no response. She had completely withdrawn into herself. Diagnosing her with a form of post-traumatic stress disorder, he explained that her mind had repressed recent events as a protective measure. Linda was subsequently transferred to a psychiatric facility with the same regimen. The doctor left and I resumed my regular work, visiting Linda every Sunday. One Sunday she didn't respond. Her doctor intercepted me before I reached her room. "Mr. Walker, there was a change in your wife's treatment yesterday." Upon learning of it, she inquired about her whereabouts and your whereabouts from the nurse. I visited her at once. She seems to have recovered most of her memory up to the beginning of the affair. Oddly enough, she has no memory of the affair itself. She seems to have blocked it out of her memory completely. If in a few months she still has no recollection of the affair, this is an opportunity to potentially save your marriage, the doctor said. The woman you are going to see now is the person she was before the affair. Am I right in assuming that only you, your sister, and your boss know the truth? He asked. Yes. To summarize, what do you suggest? I asked. We could fabricate a story about a nervous breakdown caused by overwork and a hormonal imbalance. Interestingly, Linda did have a hormonal imbalance that may have contributed to her behavior. I believe she was unhealthy when she entered into this affair and may not be fully responsible for her actions. The medication she was given, combined with her hormonal issues, may have made her susceptible to temptation. But your return of the engagement ring seemed to snap her out of that state. However, when she realized the seriousness of her actions and your near suicide, she was overcome with guilt and emotionally shut down. If that guilt comes to the surface, she may become even more desperate. If what you say is true, and Linda's actions were influenced by the illness, I can't just walk away without breaking my vows. I promised to support her in sickness and health, so I must fulfill my duties. How do you propose to proceed? I asked. I can't dictate your actions, but I can suggest a plan. If Linda's amnesia persists beyond the 3-month mark and you want to stay together, it may be best to move out of the area, or preferably out of state. Start a new job, or if possible, transfer. Linda should be busy working and not coming back here. Staying in a familiar environment can trigger her flashbacks and cause her to become completely upset. It is imperative to keep her away from old friends and especially her current job. She may be called to testify against Terrence. I can testify that she is medically unfit to do so without risking her mental health. However, you may be called to testify. If that happens, keep it a secret from Linda. I've given you a lot to think about. Now go see your wife. I entered my wife's room and found it empty. Asking the attendant, I learned that she had gone out into the garden. Going outside, I found Linda sitting at the picnic table. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. I sat down across from her, reached for her hands, and she responded with a smile. It pained me to see that familiar smile she hadn't directed at me in ages, the same one she had shown Terry recently. In that moment, I felt both love and resentment for her. I had to remind myself that this was the Linda I once knew, not the one who had caused me heartache. If we were going to mend our relationship, I needed to suppress my own pain and offer her compassion. I couldn't help but wonder if I could ever fully forgive her, let alone resume our intimacy. Then she said, "Jake, it's so good to see you. What happened to me and why am I here?" "I thought the doctor explained everything to you," I replied. "He did, but it all seems so confusing," Linda said. "He mentioned a breakdown at work due to stress and hormonal imbalance. Is that correct?" "Yes, unfortunately. But the important thing is that you're getting better. You'll need to stay here for a while longer for observation and medication adjustments. Now that you're back, I'll visit you every day, I promise." I lifted her hands and kissed them. She sighed and looked at the horizon again. The last 3 months flew by quickly. Linda showed improvement every day. We were now able to engage in conversations about everything. Despite her concerns about her memory loss, the doctor and I assured her not to strain herself trying to remember. It could provoke another nervous breakdown. At the doctor's request, I visited him. "Mr. Walker, I believe your wife has come to terms with her memory loss and is ready to rejoin you. However, I realize that you may still harbor doubts about her forgiveness. She is no longer the same person who caused you so much pain. On those difficult days when you feel the urge to pounce, remember that she won't understand why. In her mind, she hasn't committed any misbehavior. In such cases, restrain yourself and remain silent. I will be handing her over to your care, so please treat her gently. She's quite fragile. As for intimacy, let her begin. Be patient and above all, be gentle. Let her set the pace and lead the way. I suggest starting with a hug until she feels comfortable with sexual intimacy. I have not yet informed her of her dismissal, and I won't until you are fully ready. Just let me know when you're ready and I'll take care of the rest."
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.